After more than 2 decades of solitary life in the wilderness, a seasoned woodsman begins to suspect that something has changed in the forest he called home. It all started when he discovered a strange, crashed drone caught in an oak tree on his property. What seemed initially like an odd curiosity quickly unraveled into a terrifying encounter with a mysterious and deadly presence lurking deep within the woods. A revelation that would shatter his sense of safety and force him to confront dangers he never imagined existed in the place he had come to know so well. I reached out for the wire snare dangling from a low birch branch, already sensing it was empty. 3 days in a row now, the rabbits had either moved on to richer feeding grounds or had grown wary of my usual traps. With 23 years spent in these woods, I understood the patterns here in a way most people never could. I knew where the deer came to drink at dawn, which clearings turkeys preferred for dust baths, and how the weather influenced the movements of small game through the underbrush. My 47-acre property of mixed hardwood forest was familiar territory. Every fallen log, rock formation, and game trail etched into my memory. I packed the empty snare back into my canvas bag alongside 5 others. All 6 traps checked, all empty. Tomorrow, I'd relocate them to the South Ridge, where I'd seen fresh droppings earlier in the week. No point in returning to the same spots when the animals had clearly shifted their ranges. I turned back toward my cabin, following the well-worn path I'd trampled over the years. My boots knew every stone and root along the way, even as darkness crept in. The familiar weight of my .30-30 rifle rested against my shoulder. Not that I expected trouble, but years had taught me that being prepared prevented more problems than it cost. After 3 fruitless days of checking empty snares, I turned back toward my cabin, my mind weighed down with the inexplicable absence of game. As I followed the familiar path through the birch and oak, boots pressing into the leaf-strewn earth, an unusual red blinking light caught my head near the old oak grove to my left. Nothing in these woods ever blinked red. It was foreign, alien to this environment. The pulsing glow, steady like a heartbeat, emerged from roughly 8 feet up in the branches. I unslung my rifle and advanced cautiously, each step muffled by the carpet of dead leaves. The source came into view. A strange mechanical device entangled in the oak's limbs. It resembled a small, flat gray box about the size of a hardcover book with 4 tiny propellers attached. Wires ran across its surface in confusing patterns, and beneath it hung a small camera encased in cracked clear plastic. I'd heard of such things called drones on the radio, flying gadgets used by city folk for photography or deliveries, but never imagined one straying into these remote woods. The crash had bent 2 propellers and cracked the casing, yet the red light inside continued its relentless blinking, probably a battery indicator. I leaned my rifle against the oak and pulled myself up by the lowest branch to retrieve the device. It was lighter than I expected, weighing no more than 2 pounds, and its smooth plastic strangely unfamiliar beneath my fingers. Even damaged, the precision engineering fascinated me. Each screw, wire, and joint spoke of expensive, professional craftsmanship. Yet, what such a machine was doing out here, miles from the nearest neighbor or town, baffled me. There were no markings to explain its origin, only tiny serial numbers too small to decipher in the twilight. Carefully, I carried the drone back to the cabin and placed it on my workbench beside the window. By lamplight, I examined the device further. The camera housing was sophisticated, featuring multiple lenses in an array, though the cracked plastic and crooked lens suggested the crash had done significant damage. The myriad wires led to small motors and concealed components whose purposes eluded me. This was a level of technology far beyond my usual repairs, a testament to someone's complex and deliberate design. The faint warmth near the blinking light revealed that some part of the drone was still alive, powered by a battery despite the impact. Despite my wariness toward such gadgets, curiosity took hold. This strange object had come crashing through my woods, a messenger from a world outside my solitary existence, and I was compelled to understand what secrets it might yield. The memory card nestled discreetly within the drone's compact frame drew my attention the most. It was a small, unassuming rectangle about the size of my thumbnail, thinner than a dime, with tiny metal contacts running along one edge. This must be where the drone stored its precious cargo, images and videos had captured before its crash. Although I'd heard mention of these devices on the radio, digital memory cards used in cameras to save photos and footage, I'd never personally encountered one until now. The prospect that the images stored on this tiny card might reveal what had happened out here filled me with a mix of curiosity and foreboding, but unlocking the contents was a challenge. The most advanced electronic device I owned was an old battery-powered radio, designed to receive signals, certainly not capable of displaying pictures. The radio featured some connection ports, though many remained enigmatic to me. I pulled out my collection of cables and adapters accumulated over the years. Leftover antenna wires, power cords, and audio jacks, stuff that might come in handy. I fashioned a crude adapter using parts from a broken headphone jack and thin wires from an extension cord, carefully crafting a link between my radio and the memory card's reader. It wasn't elegant, more akin to a child science project, but it held promise. Powering the setup on, the radio's small display, originally meant for simple station info, suddenly flickered to life with grainy, black and white images. At first, there were shapes I could barely decipher, blurred and compressed beyond recognition, but as I navigated through the photos, a chill ran down my spine. One image clearly showed a limp human figure being dragged across the forest floor. The person's arms hung lifelessly behind him, the limbs jostling over roots and scattered leaves, creating a bloodied trail. The next photo was worse. A man's terrified face filling the frame, his mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide with raw terror, locked onto the camera's lens. The angle was skewed, as if the drone had been tumbling midair while capturing the scene. Then came an image that stopped me cold. A massive eye, the size of a dinner plate, staring right into the camera lens. The pupil was enormous and black, encircled by a shifting iris that seemed to flicker even in poor resolution. It was no typical animal eye. It glowed with an eerie intelligence that rooted me to the spot. The sequence ended abruptly, plunging the screen into a blank void. I sat back, pulse racing, unable to shake the weight of what I'd just uncovered, a silent witness on the drone's memory card revealing a recent and chilling event. Right here in the forest I called home for decades. For 3 days, I had been inspecting my traps only to find them empty each time. It was as if the rabbits had moved on to better feeding grounds or learned to avoid my usual spots. After 23 years navigating these woods, I was intimately familiar with the habits and patterns of every creature living here. My property spanned 47 acres, home to a variety of hardwoods. Familiar clearings where deer drank and turkeys bathed, and a myriad of game trails etched into the underbrush. As I returned to my cabin one evening, my eyes caught an unnatural red blinking light flickering among the branches of a massive oak tree. Nothing in these woods blinked red. Nothing at all. The pulsing light resembled a heartbeat, steady and mesmerizing, about 30 yards away and roughly 8 feet above the ground. I cautiously approached, unslinging my rifle, but keeping it lower to avoid making unnecessary noise. There, caught in the thorny grasp of the oak's branches, was a strange device. Unlike anything I had ever seen, it was a drone, a mechanical contraption with 4 small, bent propellers attached to a gray, compact body the size of a thick book. Wires crisscrossed its surface in patterns that made no sense to me, and beneath hung a tiny camera in a cracked plastic case. Though I had heard about drones on the radio, tools mostly used by city folks for capturing images or delivering packages, I had never expected to find one here deep in the woods far from civilization. This particular drone had clearly collided with the oak tree, its casing cracked, and two propellers bent out of shape, yet the red light kept blinking, a sign that some power remained within. Back in my cabin, I placed the drone on my workbench and began a careful inspection. The complexity of its engineering impressed me. It was professional and costly work, not some amateur tinkering. I discovered a tiny memory card tucked beneath the main circuit board, a small rectangular piece about the size of a thumbnail. I surmised it held digital footage from the drone's camera. Crafting a makeshift adapter from old wires and connectors, I connected the memory card to my battery-powered radio, the most sophisticated electronic device I owned. The screen flickered to life, displaying grainy, pixelated images compressed to fit the radio's simple display. Slowly, the footage came into view. First dark, indistinct shapes dancing across a pale forest floor. Then a chilling scene, a limp body being dragged through the underbrush. The arms hung lifelessly, trailing behind as the figure was pulled over roots and leaves, leaving a clear trail in the dirt. The dragger was unseen, hidden beyond the camera's frame. My breath caught when a next image appeared, the terrified face of a man, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide and haunted. It was like the drone had spun or fallen as it captured this horrific moment, the surroundings eerily familiar, the very woods I had walked 100 times. Then came an image that froze my blood. A massive eye, the size of a dinner plate, staring directly into the camera lens. Its pupil was vast and black, the iris shifting colors even through the grainy video. It was an intelligence unlike any animal I'd known, calculating, aware, and deeply unsettling. The footage ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the blank screen, hands trembling and mouth dry. The timestamp showed this had all occurred merely 2 days before I found the drone tangled in that oak tree. The man had been dragged through my land, the same forest I had long considered my sanctuary, that I did not belong to any creature familiar to these woods. Deer, coyotes, even bears I knew intimately could not match the size nor the sinister intelligence that gaze conveyed. And now I understood. Something terrible was hunting in my forest, something capable of dragging a grown man beneath the trees. The weight of the realization settled heavily on me. The small memory card I held contained a story of violence and fear, of a predator far more dangerous and cunning than any I'd encountered in my 23 years here. My quiet life had been shattered by images from a fallen drone, a silent witness to a lurking horror I could no longer ignore. At dawn, I was already geared up, rifle slung over my shoulder, the memory card tucked safely in my shirt pocket. Sleep had been elusive after the haunting images I'd witnessed, but the determination to uncover the truth pushed me forward. The creek bed running along the eastern edge of my property was my starting point. I had recognized enough landmarks in the drone footage to guide my search. I followed the creek downstream, listening to the steady rush of water while my eyes scanned the forest for any sign matching what I'd seen on that granny screen. The rifle felt heavier than usual, burdened not only with its weight, but with the knowledge of the unseen danger lurking nearby. After nearly an hour, familiar rock formations and tree clusters began to appear. The twisted birch tree bark, moss-covered boulders, and a thinning underbrush near a small clearing that matched the terrain from the footage. I was close. Then the signs of struggle emerged. Uprooted earth, deep furrows indicating something heavy had been dragged across the dirt, broken vegetation. I knelt down to inspect, noting the deep impressions and the unmistakable dark stains soaked into the soil. Blood, though blackened by time, the metallic scent lingered in the air. A grim confirmation this was no ordinary trail. The path veered away from the creek into thicker woods, marked by snapped branches and more of the dark stains. I followed with caution, every step alert, rifle ready. The trail led me to granite outcroppings I'd passed countless times. Natural walls I had never considered as anything more than silent stone, but behind them, cleverly hidden by thick brush and fallen logs arranged as a crude barrier, a cave entrance lay concealed, camouflaged so deftly I'd never noticed it before. The metallic stench of blood mixed with a pungent animal odor filled the air, a sense stronger and more unsettling than any bear or coyote I'd known. I switched off the rifle's safety and tapped on my flashlight, its beam piercing the inky blackness inside. The opening was larger than it appeared, allowing easy passage. The light revealed an uneven stone floor, but scattered across were the haunting reminders of death. White, picked clean human bones. Skulls and femurs sprawled like some grotesque mosaic, some ancient and weathered, others fresher with lingering tissue. Deeper inside the cave lay a man, face down and broken, his clothing matching that of the hapless victim from the footage. A nest-like structure caught my eye, woven branches interlaced with scraps of clothing, pieces of fabric, a child's t-shirt, torn hiking gear. The deliberate construction hinted at an intelligence beyond animal instinct. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed deep within the tunnel system. The sound was slow, deliberate, and growing closer. Instinct took over. I dropped my flashlight and sprinted blindly toward the cave entrance, brush tearing in my jacket, heart hammering in my chest. Behind me, something vast pursued, its footfalls sounding off the stone walls, accompanied by a low, guttural roar that sent birds fleeing from nearby trees. The forest I once knew had transformed into a hunting ground, and I was the prey. Following the blood trail from the creek, I soon reached a familiar rock formation, a cluster of granite outcroppings that I had passed countless times before. Yet, behind these enormous stones, concealed by thick brush and fallen logs arranged with a deliberate purpose, I found an opening I had never noticed. A hidden cave entrance camouflaged by nature itself. Despite walking these woods for over 2 decades, I hadn't discovered this place until now. The metallic scent of blood grew stronger as I approached, mingling with a musky odor reminiscent of wet fur and decay. I clicked off my rifle safety and pulled out my flashlight, revealing a dark passage large enough to walk through without crouching. Shining the beam inside, I glimpsed the labyrinth of tunnels, but more horrifyingly, bones, human bones, lay scattered across the stone floor. A rib cage, a femur, smaller fragments, all picked clean and eerily white in the flashlight's glare. Moving deeper, I found the body of a man, face down in worn hiking boots and a torn jacket matching the figure from the drone footage. His limbs were twisted unnaturally, and deep gouges lined his back, consistent with claws rather than teeth. A wallet in his pocket identified him as Kyle Henderson, 32, an experienced hiker from the nearby town. The evidence painted a grim picture. This cave had been a gruesome lair, a feeding ground for something lethal and unknown. Not far from his remains, nestled against the far wall, was an unsettling construction, a nest fashioned from branches, leaves, and scraps of clothing. Pieces of fabric and a child's t-shirt were woven purposefully into its structure, indicating a disturbing level of intelligence behind this creature's behavior. Every instinct screamed danger as a heavy sound echoed through the cavern, footsteps growing louder and more deliberate. Dropping my flashlight, I ran, leaving the darkness, bones, and unspeakable horror behind. As I ventured deeper into the cave, the unmistakable stench of death grew stronger, mingling with a musky odor that sent chills down my spine. Bones, human bones, littered the uneven stone floor. Rib cages, femurs, and smaller fragments, some worn by time, others still fresh with decaying flesh. My flashlight beam caught a deliberate arrangement against the far wall, a nest woven from branches, scraps of clothing, and fabric strips, punctuating the eerie intelligence behind this lair. Suddenly, Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed through the tunnels, growing nearer with each thud. Panic surged through me as I dropped my flashlight. The clatter resonated ominously as the source closed in. My survival instincts, honed over 23 years in these woods, screamed at me to flee. I turned and bolted towards the cave entrance, branches clawing at my jacket, my rifle bouncing against my back as I sprinted for the fading light. Behind me, the creature emerged, a towering, distorted beast nearly 10 feet tall, its form reminiscent of a grotesque bear stretched and warped by nightmare. Its limbs were unnaturally long, joints bent at painful angles, and those immense red eyes from the drone's footage blazed in the flashlight beams, pulsating with cruel intelligence. Enormous claws curved like daggers, and its elongated muzzle revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth, akin to a shark's jaw. I could feel every breath turn to ice as the sound of its pounding footsteps chased me through the twisted tunnels and into the forest. The creature pursued without relent, its presence a horrifying reminder that something monstrous and cunning lurked in the woods. I thought I knew. The aftermath of the terrifying encounter left the hunter devastated and shaken to his core. With the loss of James and William, the group's attempt to face the creature had ended in brutal failure. The wounds inflicted on the survivors were severe, and the raw terror they experienced would linger far beyond that harrowing night. As the hunters sat in the sterile hospital parking lot, the weight of what had happened pressed heavily upon him. The arrival of military personnel brought a new level of seriousness and urgency to the situation. The hunter learned that the nightmare he had faced was not an isolated event, but part of a series of similar attacks spanning multiple states. The military's involvement meant that the creature and others like it were part of an ongoing investigation of anomalous biological entities that had been tracked for months. Despite the presence of heavily armed soldiers and advanced equipment, the danger remained tangible. The military's cleanup mission involved sterilizing the cave and its surroundings, erasing all physical evidence, and managing to bury the horrific truth beneath layers of concrete and classified reports. The hunter understood that this operation was designed to keep the terrifying reality hidden from the public, maintaining a fragile illusion of safety in the surrounding communities. Returning to his cabin felt surreal. Though nothing had been stolen or moved, the simple familiarity of his home was tainted by the knowledge of the horrors so close at hand. Every shadow outside seemed loaded with potential threats, and the once peaceful forest had morphed into a hostile territory. His traps lay disturbed, and his routine was shattered as paranoia seeped into every part of his life. The hunter's nights were haunted by vivid nightmares of glowing red eyes and the creature's relentless stalking. Even when awake, he found it impossible to shake the lingering fear that something sinister still lurked nearby. The authorities' official explanation of a bear attack offered little comfort. The hunter finally faced the painful truth. His life in the woods was irrevocably changed. The forest that had been his sanctuary was now a domain of nightmares, and the presence of the creature had broken the illusion of safety he'd lived under for over 2 decades. With fresh claw marks discovered near his cabin, the reality was undeniable. This place was no longer safe. Packing his essential belongings into his pickup truck, the hunter prepared to leave behind not just his home, but the identity he had forged in these woods. The memories, the solitude, and the self-reliance that defined him felt lost. As he drove away, the weight of the encounter hung heavily in his mind, coupled with the chilling knowledge that the threat was far from over. Amidst this new and uncertain reality, the hunter understood that true peace might no longer be attainable, and that danger could be waiting in any isolated corner of the world. After the harrowing attack in the cave, things escalated swiftly with the arrival of military forces, a reality that shook me to my core. Their presence made it clear this incident wasn't isolated. Similar creatures have been tracked across several states. The military took over the situation with a precision and command that far exceeded anything local law enforcement was equipped to handle. Colonel Thomas Wright introduced himself, explaining that these so-called anomalous biological entities weren't just wandering threats, but part of a larger pattern observed throughout Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania over the past 18 months. They had been following their movements using satellite surveillance and local reports. And my woods have been just one of multiple hot spots. Military helicopters soon buzzed overhead, their rotors carving out a constant mechanical roar as they coordinated efforts to secure and assault the cave system. Ground troops, equipped with heavy weapons and protective gear, systematically moved into position while others established strict perimeters around my property and the surrounding forest. The scale of the operation was staggering, spanning multiple vehicles, soldiers in full combat gear, and air support designed to overwhelm a target far more dangerous than any normal animal. During a tense meeting in a makeshift command center, Colonel Wright laid out the military's findings and plans with a clinical detachment. Images of creatures like the one we faced, along with maps marking logged encounters, filled the table before us. The creatures displayed a terrifying intelligence, establishing territories near caves or defensible areas and methodically hunting humans. Their mutations were unlike anything documented, and the military was handling the threat with weapons and tactics suited to combat, not hunting. The battle that ensued was brutal. Automatic gunfire echoed incessantly through the dark forest and cave tunnels, punctuated by explosions and the roar of flamethrowers as teams flushed out the creature's lair. Despite the overwhelming firepower, the beast fought with remarkable ferocity and cunning, proving resistant to conventional weapons. Casualties among the military ranks underscored the deadly seriousness of the threat. Eventually, a Hellfire missile fired from an Apache helicopter delivered the decisive blow, obliterating the creature and triggering a grim silence that settled over the battlefield. In the aftermath, hazmat crews conducted a meticulous cleanup, sterilizing the area and sealing the cave with concrete to prevent any future threat. Official reports were crafted to mask the truth, attributing the deaths to an aggressive bear attack, preserving secrecy around the existence of such entities. I was left grappling with a profound realization that my secluded forest was but one battlefield in a wider war against something unnatural and terrifying. The military's involvement revealed an ongoing threat steadily growing beneath the surface of normal life, one that would forever change my understanding of safety and solitude in the wilderness. The military's after-action was swift and unforgiving, aiming to erase every trace of the nightmare uncovered within my forest. Heavy machinery rolled in, flattening the earth where the cave had hidden, while teams in hazmat suits meticulously collected the scattered biological remains. The cave itself was filled with quick-setting concrete, a final seal to ensure nothing could ever dwell again in those dark tunnels. Flamethrowers scorched the surrounding area, sterilizing any surface that might have been touched by the creature or its victims. The operation left the woods scarred, a harsh reminder that what happened here was no longer part of the natural world. Official reports would label the tragedy a bear attack gone wrong, stories sanitized for public consumption, while the terrifying truth faded into secrecy. Soldiers maintained strict perimeter control for days afterward, their presence casting a new kind of shadow over the once familiar trails and clearings. Warning signs in yellow tape marked off the contaminated zones, keeping unauthorized eyes away from the aftermath of the destruction. The remnants of my sanctuary, the twisted trees, the disturbed soil, and the concrete-encased cave stood as silent monuments to a secret that would never be spoken aloud. The military promised ongoing surveillance to detect any further anomalous activity, a bitter reassurance that the danger had not entirely passed, but had been driven underground, buried beneath layers of concrete and silence. As the sun set on the battered forest, I realized that the life I had known was sealed away, just like the cave, closed off forever to the world I once understood. The past wasn't just closed, it was locked behind a concrete wall, hidden beneath the forest floor, carrying the weight of horrors best forgotten. For 23 years, I lived among these woods, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of nature and the solitude my 47-acre haven provided. But everything changed when the drone crashed, revealing horrors hidden beneath the canopy I thought I knew. The once peaceful forest now felt hostile, each shadow a possible threat, every rustle a cause for alarm. The nests woven from clothing scraps, the scattered bones in the cave, and a massive red eyes watching me shifted my understanding of this place entirely. The military's intervention was swift and overwhelming. Their helicopters roared overhead, and soldiers combed through the forest, burning out tunnels and erasing all traces of the creature. Roads were barricaded, checkpoints established, and biohazard warnings hung on trees I had climbed for years. What was once a sanctuary was now a battleground sealed with concrete, its secrets buried alongside the victims. Returning home after the operation, the cabin stood untouched, yet the feeling of safety had vanished. Every familiar path seemed shadowed by uncertainty. Routine tasks like checking snares or tending the garden became exercises in paranoia. The woods had become a landscape of fear, and despite my knowledge of every tree and trail, I felt like a stranger in my own domain. Then came the discovery that shattered any remaining sense of security. Fresh, unnatural claw marks on the oak beside my cabin. The proof was undeniable. This place was no longer safe. The ease of isolation was replaced by a pressing reality that danger lurked, not just here, but in any remote corner of the world. I packed the essentials: rifles, ammunition, radio gear, memories, and left behind the life I had built. As the forest disappeared in my rearview mirror, I carry with me the weight of what I had witnessed, a constant reminder that the wilds I loved had transformed into something far more sinister. The wilderness I called home had become a new reality, one where monsters existed beyond the edges of human understanding, and true safety was an elusive dream. After uncovering the terrifying truth hidden within his peaceful woods and witnessing the devastating military intervention that followed, the hunter faces a harsh new reality. The forest he once knew, his sanctuary for over 2 decades, has been irrevocably altered by the presence of the unknown creature and the forces mobilized to eradicate it. With the knowledge that such monstrous threats may exist in any isolated wilderness, he embarks on a reluctant journey away from his home, burdened by the awareness that true safety has become elusive in a world where once familiar places can harbor unimaginable dangers. If this story captivated your imagination and provoked deep reflection, please consider subscribing, liking, or sharing it with others who appreciate tales that challenge our perception of the wilderness. Your support helps bring more gripping encounters like this to light.